17 not admitted without parents or guardian. Under 17 not admitted without parents or guardian. Under 17 not admitted without parents or guardian.
Good evening, fans of fantastic films. I'm Bill Van Ryn from fanzine Drive-In ASYLUM and the curator of the Facebook page Groovy Doom. And to my right is Mr. Sam Panico from website BNS Movies and also a contributor to Drive-In ASYLUM. How you doing, Sam?
Awesome. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, it's I'm very excited about these two movies. So
Yes.
I hope you are too. These are just I was cutting together the trailer for the show this week, and I just got so excited when I started watching all those clips. I was like, wow, I can't think of a better double feature.
Yeah, and it really ties in really nicely too, thematically. Been thinking about it all week.
I guess we could talk about our first feature first. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And it was made, I think this is the first movie that was made after Night of the Living Dead that had something to do with zombies. Do you think that sounds right?
It sounds pretty close. It's from '72, so there may have been a few stragglers in there, but I think it's obviously influenced by it, especially with the idea of everybody in the house and the impending doom on them.
We already have some chatters in the chat room. Joe Rude's there. Hey, Joe, let's get this party started. And we complied. The party has been started. I'm training myself to lower my voice, though, because the last 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, I've been yelling when I go back to edit the video. So
I'm training myself to raise my voice a little bit.
Yeah, your voice is always quiet. I don't know. When I edit these shows, it's a challenge because I got to like tweak the volume for each of us. But
I'll do my best to project tonight.
David James Oliver Beckwith, hello. And Nora Wallace says she's cheating on Gene and George with us tonight. So don't tell them. You can always go back and watch our show later when it's not live on YouTube, but then you can't chat with us and, you're going to miss all the fun. Frederick Birdsall says, of all people, my mom loves this movie, and your mom is awesome as far as I'm concerned. Mark Dockham says, hey, guys. Nice to see you, Mark. And so this was the first real zombie movie that was made after Night of the Living Dead, and the influence is it's right there on the surface of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. But also, it's not quite the one thing that they didn't do, and this is something that I wanted to bring up with you, is it's a PG rated movie, and they don't actually go for the guts in Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, and I think that's probably the one thing that keeps it from being celebrated more often. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's not really, I wouldn't say it's obvious. Well, obviously it's not well known as Night of the Living Dead, but this is a movie I didn't really see until maybe the last 5 or 6 years, because like you said, it's not really as celebrated as a film, which I think is a shame. And hopefully if we have any first-time watchers tonight, let us know. I think this is a great movie to enjoy, and I hope that everybody's seen it, but if not, I think you're in for a treat. Also, one of the first movies that Bob Clark did, and his resume is incredible. Just within the first 2 or 3 years after this, doing Death Dream and Black Christmas, and then Porky's, and then strangely enough, Rhinestone, and A Christmas Story. And he produced the film Moonrunners, which was actually the inspiration for The Dukes of Hazzard. And so his in the Baby Genius movie. So he's really all over the place with his resume. The other interesting person who's in this is Alan, who's in this. It's Alan Ormsby.
Alan Ormsby, yeah.
Yeah, who would write Death Dream, Deranged, My Bodyguard, and directed one of my favorite movies, Popcorn, which is pretty cool. And then he has a really crazy thing on his resume there's a toy that he actually, special effects toy that he helped create. Yeah, Alan Ormsby actually designed the Hugo Man of a Thousand Faces doll. It came out in the 70s, I believe. The first time I ever saw it, Pee Wee Herman had it on his HBO show when he would go through the box and throw all the toys out. And that's where I saw it. And then another crazy movie that Alan Ormsby wrote is Paul Schrader's Cat People, which is another fave. And he wrote Porky's 2 the next day.
The first place that I saw children shouldn't play with dead things was on Chiller Theater in Pittsburgh. Chilly Billy showed it, and it was pretty scary as a little kid, because even though there's not really that much gore in it, but it has a very strong atmosphere, especially for a kid.
It's an unsettling movie, and it just has a really cool otherworldly feel, which so few movies do. My biggest influence growing up, because I grew up in the late, I was born in 72, so Dawn was really my zombie influence. And it's such a big movie to me, Between
Children and Dawn, let's think of some other zombie movies that came out. I guess, well, The Child was before Dawn. That's our second feature tonight.
Yeah. I'm going to look this up right now. The other thing I thought was interesting about the movie is Jeff, who's in this movie.
Jeff Gillen.
Yeah, he went on to play Santa Claus in A Christmas Story.
Oh yeah. Well, the other biggie that came out between Night and Dawn was Let Sleeping Corpses Lie.
Yeah.
And I guess Don't Open the Window.
I don't know if you consider the Blind Dead movies zombie movies or not.
Sure, yeah. I mean, they were still influenced by Romero.
And Messiah of Evil obviously is.
Yeah.
Partially, The Crazies is on the outskirts of it's kind of like how Nightmare City, they're like, well, they're not zombies, they're the infected, but it's close. And then Sugar Hill obviously came out around that time too, but that's more of a voodoo zombie thing. There's such a weird, like Mega Man and kind of the End of the World movies always had these mutants that were kind of zombie-esque. That's pretty close to Let Sleeping Corpses Lie would be the next one I would say that was important. And then obviously Death Dream is very much a zombie film when it would come out after this.
And plus, it has to be said that Romero can't take all the credit for the zombies, because he was heavily influenced by Carnival of Souls and also The Last Man on Earth, starring Vincent Price. Which is
the same story as the Omega Man, I Am Legend.
Yeah,
so that's very much a zombie influence. And I think there's a lot of well, obviously he was EC Comics influenced if you saw Creepshow. So there's a big chunk of that influence. So many of the old EC comic stories are always that the murdered husband rising back from the dead, but not in the numbers. It's funny. My wife was saying something to me the other day about, wouldn't it be funny if this whole COVID thing was like something that came from outer space? And I was like, well, and Dawn of the Dead, that's the Jupiter probe is the whole story. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's my favorite part of Dawn is like, it's kind of what would happen now. There's a million stories of why it happened, and none of them are ever given to you as the right answer.
Do you mean Night?
Because in Night, but also in Dawn, there's a bit of that too, where they're having the discussion show whenever they have that kind of point counterpoint show, and everybody's kind of fighting over it, and then kind of like the voodoo when Hell is Full explanation is given much later.
This is a controversial opinion, of course, but a lot of people actually like to talk about Night of the Living Dead, and they're like, well, it's brilliant because they never tell you what happened. I mean, like, they never tell you the reason for it happening, and they do tell you the reason for it happening. It's obviously the reason that it's happened, or at least the reason that they meant for it to happen, because they were just writing a little movie. And they were like, well, what reason are we going to have for the dead coming back to life? And there's a whole scene where they're talking about a fucking probe that came from Venus and crashed right there. So of course that's the reason for it. But it's not a really good reason. Oh, the other thing is that in Night, if you watch the newscasts of the talking heads on TV, and they even tell you that towards the end of the movie, like, the levels of the mysterious radiation are decreasing. So
Yeah.
there's sort of a hint that it might come to an end soon, and that they have it under control, which of course makes the tragedy of the ending even worse.
Yeah.
Because, you know, maybe they could get this under control and this horrible thing that happened will blow over, but all these people are now dead, and of course Ben's now dead. The hero of the story.
He dies just in time for Allegheny County to go green.
But Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things really is not on the same level as Night of the Living Dead. I don't want to give it that kind of build-up because it's just not, it doesn't have the same visceral impact, but it's more of a creepy thing. And
Yeah.
I will say that this movie, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, that we're going to watch first, this has one of the best sequences where zombies come back to life. That scene where the graveyard erupts is just, that has to be one of the best 2 or 3 minutes of motion picture ever made. And it's just so creepy and scary, and I love it. I'm so excited to be watching it.
Frederick Birdsall asked on the side, he says, do you like your zombies lumbering, or do you prefer the track star ones? And I'll answer first, Bill. I prefer the lumbering zombies. I don't like the running ones, unless they're in Nightmare City. And as I've established, those are the infected, and those are not zombies. Those are just weird.
The lumbering is the only way to go. And the scary thing about zombies is how many of them there are. It's about being mobbed and surrounded. And, you know, once those numbers get out of control, there's really not much you can do to protect yourself. And that's the scary thing for me anyway.
The scary thing for me always was the scene in Dawn where the wife's so happy to see her husband come back. And when he takes the big chunk out of her shoulder, that idea that the people you love are going to come back after death and not have anything left, except for Bub, but that's much later. I like the mindless lumbering zombies. I don't know. That's my opinion. I wanted to let everybody know too, if you're watching this, and it is on YouTube, Bill posted links, but if you have Amazon Prime, it is free on Amazon Prime, and it is also on Tubi if you have the Tubi app. So there's multiple versions, great versions of this available to watch that make it really easy to watch. A lot of options for this one tonight.
Lana's there. Hello, Lana, La Rev. And Dave Rendon, nice to see you too. And Jerry Smay. Jerry's an old friend of mine. We go back years, and Jerry's a huge Elvira fan, and he also saw The Deadly Spawn on Mona's Place, just like I did, and we talk about that all the time.
I saw a lot of discussion about Mona's Place this week on your Facebook page, so that made me incredibly happy.
Yeah, that was me and Jerry mostly, and it's just one of those weird things that not many people seem to remember. Mona's hard to track down too. There are pictures of her out there. I was going to put them in the video that goes on YouTube, but you know how touchy people get about their pictures that they post online. Well, you stole that picture from me, and you didn't give me any credit for it.
That picture that I stole, you stole that picture.
Yeah,
the picture that I stole.
These were like autographed 8x10s that she did. So,
I really missed those times when TV celebrities were big enough that they would be different places signing. Like Chili Billy would always do that when I was a kid. They're like, you can meet Chili Billy at Kogo's. And I lived, an hour and 20 minutes, an hour. Before 279, Elwood City was an hour and a half away from the city. And I would beg my parents to please take me to some Kogo's in Lawrenceville to meet Chili Billy for a minute. And it never
that was
happened.
very exciting. I never met Chili Billy until he did a convention around like 2012, I think. And I finally met him. And he was so cool. And Lori was there too, Lori Cardell.
Oh, wow.
So I got to meet both of them at the same time. And it was a very special evening. So I do have the ad gallery rendered again. So hopefully this will work. I would have been very disappointed if I couldn't produce this for you because I worked so hard on it. But this first ad is May 1972 in El Paso. And, the ad campaign is so weird too. Don't you agree?
Oh, yeah. It almost seems like a comedy. And while there are some comedic elements, it's not a comedy.
Ultimately, it ends up being just a straightforward horror film. I think Alan Ormsby created the ad campaign. He created the ad campaign for Orgy of the Living Dead, that triple feature with Fangs of the Living Dead, Revenge of the Living Dead, and Curse of the Living Dead. That was Alan that created that press book. And here's Detroit Won't Let It Go, third scary week. That's how popular Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is. Detroit held it over 3 weeks. I mean, that's really not all that exciting, but it was, the ad trumpeted it.
We can't believe that a movie was here for longer than 2 days.
This is something interesting, a teaser campaign, I guess, that came in the press book. I don't have this press books. I guess they were talking about Orville's coming out party, that whether you were invited to it or not, and Anya was invited. Unfortunately for her, didn't go well for her because she's now the late Anya. I'm hoping every member of the cast got one of these little panels. Here's Mr. Wins. I guess that's one of the corpses. They don't really ever say that name in the movie, but he wasn't invited. Which that's not very nice, you know. Mr. Wins is going to be very disappointed that he wasn't invited to Orville's coming out party. These things are hard to track down, by the way, these little teasers, because often they ran in areas of the newspaper where they weren't mentioning movies. So you really have to go through the whole newspaper if you're going to find these teasers. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, we said earlier, obviously it was influenced by Night of the Living Dead, and here it is playing with Night of the Living Dead on a double feature. So that's pretty exciting.
I would probably put, what movie would you put first of the two of them? It's a weird thought, because I think I would probably put Night second, but on the other hand, like the end of Night is so brutal, maybe you need an aperitif afterwards to enjoy.
Yeah, that's the main event as far as I'm concerned. Night of the Living Dead would be. But, you know, Children is very strong, stands on its own. I don't mean to make it out like Children is a complete copy or a ripoff, because, you know, it is and it isn't.
It's got some amazing, I really like the music at the end. There's some atonal music at the end with them boarding the boat. I really like that part of the film. And I think one of the other things I think is really interesting for a movie from 1972, there are gay characters in this, and they're not portrayed as villains or really as the butt of too many jokes. You know what I mean? It's kind of, not to use the phrase, but kind of woke for 1972.
I mostly agree with that statement. They are very stereotypical.
Yeah.
They're extremely effeminate, but you're right. I mean, they're sort of depicted as just another part of this theater troupe. Here's a triple feature with The Body Stealers and Lady Frankenstein. I don't know if you can see it in there, but it also says that you can get an electric in-car heater at both drive-ins. What could that possibly be other than a serious fire hazard? Have you ever seen one?
It's like one of those coil heaters that plugs into the cigarette adapter.
Okay.
But it is a disaster, because I just imagine me getting excited about the movie and kicking it and my feet getting burned on it.
It doesn't seem like a good idea to me.
Bring a blanket.
So, most of the movies that we talk about on here have multiple titles when they play the theaters. This one was mainly known as Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, except for this run. The first movie is It Happened at Nightmare Inn, which is another title for Terror from Under the House is the title that it's most well known for in theaters here in the United States. But this is Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things as the B feature, Things from the Grave.
That's a great title too, though.
I don't know. I kind of like that better than Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
Yeah. Because
that's sort of long and clunky. And Things from the Grave is just very eerie and a little disgusting. So that's it for the Drive-In Asylum ad gallery for Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. Now, what were we going to talk about after? The favorite zombie movie?
Yeah, your favorite. What is your favorite zombie movie?
I couldn't really, I don't think I could choose. There's so many movies that I love that have zombies in them. If I had to, I'd probably have to say, like, I don't want to say Dawn of the Dead, even though that's kind of really my favorite zombie movie.
Yeah.
I just don't think that it gets much better than Dawn of the Dead. But there are movies that, you know, I think are just as good, like tonight's second feature, The Child. I really think it's very good, and it's one of the cheapest looking movies you've ever seen, which also makes it kind of interesting because Night of the Living Dead, of course, was a very cheap zombie movie that's also one of the best of all time. I think that the cheaper your budget is, the better your zombie movie is.
Yeah, I agree. I think I in the same way, like I think probably zombie is or zombie flesh eaters or whatever they call it, full cheese zombie, probably my favorite zombie movie just because it's we've talked about it before. It's all killer and no filler. It's like if you like Dawn of the Dead, but you don't want to talk about the death of American consumerism and you just want to see brains, I would pick that one. I also really like City of the Living Dead too, another Fulci one. Not as much of a zombie movie, more just weirdness. Um,
Yeah, that was my problem that I had with that movie. That's The Gates of Hell, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah.
I get those titles mixed up all the time. But yeah, it was not what I expected it to be, and it just really disappointed me as a kid. I kind of like it now.
The Beyond I like a lot, but I don't really think of The Beyond as a straight up zombie movie, even though there are zombies.
Not
It's
at all.
more of a supernatural movie. Um, I like Shaun of the Dead a lot too. I think that's a pretty fun movie for a
Yeah, that's
modern.
pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it's got so many references to other films within it, and it plays with the conventions of the genre a lot, and I really like that. I started watching One Cut of the Dead, and I think that might move up a bit in my list. And someone just said Burial Ground, which is a sentimental favorite because I quote from it all the time, and it is probably the scummiest zombie movie there is, which is a feat. But I like that a lot too. I actually the child's up there too. I really like the end of the child is really intense, and I watched Dead Heat last night, which is nobody's favorite zombie movie, maybe mine. Um, who doesn't love Joe Piscopo in a zombie movie? But Treat Williams is a zombie, but it's also Vincent Price's last horror movie. He's barely in it. Darren McGavin's in it. There's some really great effects in it, and there's a scene where all of this food in a butcher shop comes back to life and becomes zombified, including a giant cow that doesn't have a head. There's some pretty intense effects in it. You have
Tats
this.
Yorkie says his favorite zombie movie is Shockwaves.
I'm surprised you didn't pick that one, Bill. That's a favorite.
It is one of my favorite zombie movies. Yeah, that's another one though. Like they're zombies, but it's not a classic Romero type zombie movie. It's just sort of, the villains happen to be dead.
Yeah, we should call those zombies, comma, but dot dot dot.
And Merle O'Kelly is in the chat too. Merle is the one who does Pinsploitation.
Oh, awesome.
So it's great to see you here, Merle. Bill Green from Drive-In Asylum's here. I don't think there's... Oh, John Fulcher. I'm not sure if we mentioned him. Yeah, John brought up the Children, which is another one of my favorites. And they're zombies too, even though they don't eat any human flesh or brains. They just want to burn you to death with their nuclear hands, which I think is a much more efficient way of murdering people.
And they had kind of blackish fingernails too.
Yeah, they were goth before goth was a thing, the Children.
I'm going to bring up a really bad zombie movie, Kiss Daddy Goodbye, if you've ever seen that. That's a really bad zombie movie.
I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's about two kids.
What year is it, first of all?
1981.
Oh, okay. Well, then I really should have seen it, and I haven't.
Two kids whose father gets killed by a biker gang, and they try to keep him alive like Weekend at Bernie's style so that they don't get put in an orphanage. And meanwhile, they're trying to keep the biker gang from attacking them again. And it has Fabian in it as a sheriff.
Yeah. Fabian.
And Sally Hardesty's in it as well.
Marilyn Burns.
Yeah. And she plays the Board of Education employee who comes to be friends with the kids. And John Cedar from the Manitou and Robert Dreyer, who's in Savage Streets, not a zombie movie, but one of my favorite movies. The only copy I have of it is a bootleg VHS that has Spanish subtitles. So maybe it'd be a better movie if I saw it on a great Blu-ray. But that's another weird zombie movie where the kids have mental powers and they raise their father from the dead and use him to kill people.
That's kind of in line with the child tonight. That's
Yeah.
what Rosalie's game plan is.
And Juana just brought up Return of the Living Dead. Also is one of my favorites. When I was a kid, I never wanted to like it because obviously it's like it goes away from Romero, and it was like the split between the people that made Night of the Living Dead. But now that I'm older and I watch it, that movie is an awesome roller coaster of exploitation and fun. Linnea Quigley dancing on graves, and a lot of just goofy stuff, and the government shutting everything down. There's so much good stuff in that movie. That's a definite favorite, and great soundtrack too. Like a perfect soundtrack, perfect movie punks are in that movie. So beyond just the zombies, and Tarman too.
That soundtrack is pretty interesting because, like you said, it's mostly punk rock bands on there, and then in the middle of all of it is SSQ.
Yeah, everybody knows the 45 Grave song from it, but they don't remember that.
Yeah, SSQ jams, and in case you don't know who SSQ is, it's a band that effectively turned into the solo act Stacy Q.
Ah, yes.
Two hearts that beat as one. I need you.
That was a big MTV hit. Merle asked, do we like Night of the Living Dead 1990? And I will say 100% yes. I actually love Night of the Living Dead 90.
Yeah, I like it. Because I think it's just it's a very well done remake.
I love the
end. Touched Night of the Living Dead, and somehow Savini did.
I love the ending because it bookends the beginning of Dawn, where you see the helicopter fly over the farmhouse.
Yeah,
and it's really cool because you could watch the two movies together and like tie them in. I thought that was brilliant. So that's probably my favorite part of that. And also Savini's effects are insane in that movie. There's some really great effects, and it's a movie that you know if you know every beat of the original, it doesn't really upset me that he made it. It's not like I was going to name some directors that I dislike that if they had made it, I wouldn't have liked it. But I'm going to be nice tonight.
Well, speaking of the effects, I don't know if it's readily available, but there is a version of that movie that's uncut with extra gore, and I've never seen that. I guess it accidentally came out on VHS. Like somebody put the uncut version out accidentally on VHS, so it is out there somewhere. But
I'm shocked that movie's never had like a big release from Arrow or Shout Factory or something with like filled with extras, and because it really feels kind of like a lost film at this point.
Yeah. Merle said it was heavily cut, so Savini was disappointed with it, and I'm sure he was because it's Tom Savini. Like he puts a lot into his gore.
He had a real run of a lot. His effects were amazing in that era because that's right around when Two Evil Eyes came out too, which is full of some awesome Savini stuff. My first convention was the Pittsburgh Comic-Con in 1990, and Savini brought the Pit and the Pendulum effect from Two Evil Eyes and actually did a live demo of it getting cut in half, which was pretty intense for a lot of the people at the Monroeville Palace Inn that were not ready for a body to spray blood all over the floor.
So I'm pretty sure everybody knows the links are available for tonight's movies on the Groovy Doom page. I made a recent post update with links to both movies. And we should get into our first feature tonight, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, directed by Bob Clark. And we'll be back after the movie to talk about it here on the Drive-In Asylum double feature and to set up the third feature. So let's get to it.
Under 17 not admitted without parents or guardian.
Welcome back to the Drive-In Asylum double feature, and we just finished our first movie, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. I'm suitably creeped out after watching that. That movie really has a very scary, downbeat ending.
It does. I love the boat scene at the end, and it just gets great. Like you said, there's one point where you said, "Okay, the movie's really started now," and it's about like an hour and 10 minutes into it.
That's probably the worst thing that I could say about Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is that it really does have some serious pacing issues. It could move a little faster, and really all that we have in the first hour of the movie is some characterization and the satanic ritual.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
The first one was a bad one because it didn't work.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Valerie got in the grave and she did it right.
He's like, "You're just a salary man," or whatever she says. "You're just a suit. Get out of the grave."
You petty pilfering
Yeah.
pervert, and all that alliteration that they had.
And then get out of the grave, and then that's it. And then she shows him how to do it right, and then all hell breaks loose.
Bill Wilton Jordan, nice to see you. And I hope you watched Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things with us. You know, one thing I noticed while I was watching the movie this time was how utterly subservient everybody is to Alan.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's really sort of not realistic because, let's be honest, that guy that he called a side of beef would have clobbered him several times over.
Yeah.
But something they don't really, I'm not sure if they make a reference to it or not, but if you weren't employed, you had a more likely chance of being sent to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And I think that was what the real threat was there. I don't know if Alan ever made that completely obvious.
And we talked before the movie started about, is this movie influenced by Night of the Living Dead? And I kept that in mind. And 100% at the end, whenever the zombies are breaking in, that whole hammering they found a hammer somewhere. He's like, "Where'd these tools come from?" Kind of blocking themselves into the building. And I've always wondered that theory, not to echo one of the dramatic fights in Night of the Living Dead. You're like, why don't you just run from these things that can't run and can't really logically function, especially when there weren't that many of them to start with. And then, by that point, it's too late. If you have to debate it, it's too late.
When they first retreated to the cottage, it really didn't look like they would have had a hard time just if they bolted right through them. But then we wouldn't have had a movie.
Yeah, that's always the answer. Well, we wouldn't have had a movie if it wasn't for this to happen.
Becca left a comment. Horror movies are always better when hosted by handsome men with beards.
Oh, who would that be? Oh, thank you, baby.
I think she's your wife.
Oh, so I'm gonna have to hunt down whoever that is. My wife. My wife, as they say.
Sean Midas says, "Wow, remember watching on Chiller Theater as a kid and glad to have seen projected at April Ghouls 2014 and Exhumed in 2019. When we watched it at April Ghouls, that was the thing I was looking forward to. You know, there's always the one movie that you really want to see in the lineup, and that, you know, even though it's all good, you know, that's the one you're anxious for. And mine was Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, and it was the last movie on whatever night that it played. And I had a toothache, and I just kept telling myself, I'm like, as long as I can get through this movie, I can go have this tooth dealt with on Monday. And, you know, but I couldn't even stay and watch the whole movie because my tooth chose that moment to start becoming excruciatingly painful. So I left halfway through Children Shouldn't Play with Dead.
And then you had that long ass drive.
Yeah, that's why I kept thinking that. I was like, even if I pull out of the drive-in now, it's still going to be another 50 minutes before I can get home and take a pain pill.
Yeah.
So,
that drive, I always think, am I gonna die on the way home? That's usually why we get a room pretty close, because it's such a haul, especially after all back roads and deer and that house that looked like Friday the 13th that burned down last year.
Oh yeah, that place was there for eons.
It really looked like Friday the 13th. It was from the second movie. Yeah, it was really intense looking. And It's funny. We were really sad, especially with this last one canceled. We were like thinking, oh, at this point, we would already be going. We always go to the same diner on Friday night before, and like, oh, at 11 o'clock, we probably would have been getting a buffalo chicken pizza, and you know, my wife always wakes up by the third movie and says popcorn, and then by the time I get back to the car, she's sleeping again.
So Bill says, since children shouldn't play with dead things had a PG rating, do you think this means it was suitable for families with young kids? Absolutely.
Yeah. Suitable to give kids nightmares, especially when that one zombie like levitates out of the ground. If I had seen that as a kid on show or theater, I probably wouldn't have slept that night.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but that sequence where the zombies start coming out of the ground is just fantastic. And there's one moment where the guy Emerson, he's like cornered by this zombie, and there's a hand sticking out of the ground that grabs him and holds him there. And it's a great shot because the actor just walks over to where the hand is. The hand grabs him, and then all of a sudden, like the whole zombie comes up.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Up his body.
My favorite parts of this movie are obviously the attack, and then I really love the ritual scenes. Obviously, I think you compare that ritual scene with "I Drink Your Blood" are both pretty great ritual scenes.
Can we talk about the makeup in this movie?
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's obviously it's a lot of masks and stuff, but on the other hand, I really like it. It's we did talk about as good as the effects are. Everybody just sits around these corpses that don't smell and don't really gross. These corpses have been buried for a long time, and people are just sitting with them on the couch and chilling out with them.
Well, they do talk about how they smell, but they don't act like they smell.
No,
you really wouldn't want to get close to something like that.
No, and people are hanging all over them and sitting next to them. It just seems, for as good as they look, that's a troublesome thing.
You're right. A lot of them are masks, but also there is some good makeup in there too. And even the masks, they're supposed to be like these half-rotten corpses, so you don't really expect a lot of animation in the face. And they shoot it well. You don't notice that it's just a bunch of rubber masks.
Yeah, for only being Bob Clark's second movie, it's really shot well, and it feels, he had done one short before his first movie, but for a second movie, it holds up really well. And then obviously, he really picks up. By the time he's at Black Christmas, he's firing on all cylinders, because I think that movie has no pacing issues, and it's awesome throughout. But this is a good lead to that, and to Death Dream too, which I feel is dark as this movie ends. Death Dream is one of the darkest movies I've ever seen. There's nothing happy in that entire movie.
Death Dream is much more serious.
Yeah, this has a lot of elements of not almost slapstick, but not that far, but close. And Death Dream's like, nope, no more jokes.
Yeah, agreed.
Black Christmas has obviously a lot of levity. Margaret Kidder's character, especially, is great in almost every scene she's in. That poor cop that has to deal with her. But this is a good. I always love seeing, especially when directors get to do that many movies before they're well known. It's really interesting seeing their evolution.
The music in this film is notable, or rather, should I say the sound effects, because there really isn't music in it. Carl Zittrer did it, and he also did the music for Black Christmas. And it's just a bunch of weird electronic blips and burbles, but it's very effective.
Yeah, there's some pings at one point that almost sound like the strings of a piano being plucked or something, where it's like it really does a great job of exacerbating the tension. Which isn't that what the music should do anyway? It shouldn't call attention to itself, but it almost calls attention to itself here because it's so not music, and that's what I love about it.
There's a couple scenes where they show a pan out over the graveyard, and then there's another one where they show some vegetation behind the cottage, and there's this weird sort of like woo 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 going on. And it's like, is that an animal or is it an electronic instrument? You're never quite sure.
Yeah, and that's what I love about it. It's it fits the movie.
And Sean said, I love the scene where Alan tosses Anya to the horde and everyone has a shocked look, including the zombies.
Yeah. Alan is really the villain of this movie, if you think about it. The zombies are just like a force of nature. And he's just
Yeah.
kind of like the prick that you want to see get his.
He took everyone else down with him, too.
Yeah. It's kind of, I think it's very much an end of the 60s. Kind of everybody's seen through these gurus and leaders. Do you know what I mean? And they were really all out for themselves and not all about bettering the people that joined their groups. So it has a lot of that early 70s cynicism, which I enjoy. And nobody gets out alive, which is very Night of the Living Dead about it as well.
So there's Gene. He popped over from the Drive-In Super Monsterama page and says Mrs. Tredoni is murdering people over here. They're watching Alice, Sweet Alice tonight.
Oh, man. What a great movie. Don't you mean Communion?
Or The Mask Murders.
Yeah.
And there's another title, too.
Becca says that she's always surprised by that movie. She always forgets who the killer is. It's like eternally a surprise to her, which is nice. I mean, if a movie can do that. Maybe it's like Clue. Maybe there's 3 different endings and you don't realize. Yeah.
I think it's more because she falls asleep during the movie.
Yeah. That was my favorite part of your. I mentioned before on the show when you showed the 3 movies in Edgewood or Regent Square. People that had never seen Alice, Sweet Alice being devastated by the end of the movie. Like, I don't want to ruin it because even though it's old, I don't want to ruin it because I still love the surprise of it at the end of it. But when the blood comes out of the one guy's neck, everybody was just like, what? Like, nobody was expecting that. And just at the end, everybody was just like almost devastated by it, which is funny because the night started with Pieces, which is a laugh a minute madcap romp of people.
In retrospect, we probably should have showed Pieces last that night.
Yeah. Pieces is a crowd pleaser. Alice is a crowd upsetter. But that's okay. It was very punk rock of you to end the night with Alice, Sweet Alice. A movie that nobody knew the ending to, even though it was made in the early 70s. And like, wait, Brooke Shields wasn't in this as much? Isn't she the star?
Well, yeah, they re-released it in 1981, and they re-edited it to make it look like she was in the movie a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But I can't even tell you what the difference between the 2 movies is. I know they did something different, but I'm not sure what.
Brooke Shields was a big enough star to get her own action figure when I was a kid. I remember they had the Brooke doll that was like a Barbie, and it was a Brooke. And she also, I remember just seeing the Jordache commercials nonstop. She was I really feel like today's entertainment world is so fragmented. We won't have stars that are that big. You know what I mean? Like you could ask probably 8 out of 10 people in 1981 knew who Brooke Shields was. You know what I mean? Versus like today, not everybody's that well known. So again, amazing that she was in this movie too.
Our second feature is going to be The Child. But before we get to our second feature, first we have a couple of things to do. And Sam has a cocktail to tell us about.
Yeah, come out to the kitchen with me. I'll take you to my kitchen.
I have chosen not to drink this weekend because I went back and I watched last week's show and I must have been a little bit trashed. So
a little.
This weekend I have this cucumber melon water.
Aw. Well, I've been drinking, but I'm not trash, so that's always a good thing, right?
We only promote good living here at Drive-In ASYLUM.
It's really sad. My snacks are always like carrot sticks and you know what I mean, and like low-fat popcorn. I'm really boring, except for this drink. This drink is not going to be boring. So this is again another like a beach drink. I don't know why I've been thinking. We've been watching movies about evil kids and drinking beach drinks, but go with me on this. This is a painkiller. We're going to start with 2 ounces of dark rum. But you know what? If you're cheap and you only got one kind of rum, just go with it, right? So we put that in. We're going to use a shaker on this one. Pretty exciting. We're going to have some orange juice, an ounce of orange juice. So this drink is very healthy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to put a little extra for the kids. And then some pineapple juice. And then I've been experimenting with some of the other ingredients in here, so get ready. Becca said that this drink was, quote, disgusting. So, pineapple juice. This is real, right from a can of pineapples, which I was going to use for another drink, but I decided not to. And then finally, our last ingredient in this is some creme, some Coco Lopez, which they really haven't changed the can art since like the mid 50s. Look at that. That's
Wow.
my dad probably had the same can in his bar. And this is not liquid. I thought that it was going to be liquid, and it's not. It's very syrupy and disgusting. So I remember the first time I went to Riverside, I was like, oh, I probably can't drink here, so I didn't bring any drinks. And someone had like a full tiki bar in back of it, and it made me think, it's like, man, did they have Coco Lopez and all these other accoutrements in it? Who can say? So I put all that stuff in a shaker. And earlier, as I was watching the first movie, Bill, I spilled my first drink, so I've switched to a child-safe, spill-proof cup.
It didn't have anything to do with the fact that you were drunk.
I wasn't drunk. I'd only had one drink. I was just tired. It's been a long week. All right, so then we're going to shake this up. I'm a big fan of a all-metal shaker because then you can really feel how cold it gets.
That's the way it's got to be.
Look at that. I'm like Brian Brown in Cocktail. And then
Except you're not a Scientologist.
no, not yet. And then this is a weird part of this drink. You actually put a splash of salt in it. It's supposed to, because it's a beach drink, you're supposed to think like you're getting some of the waves in your drink. I don't know. That feels like bullshit. And then finally, hopefully you got a lot of spices in your fridge because we're going to put a little splash of nutmeg on it. This is not a splash. I don't know. Is it a splash? These ingredients. And then you screw on the top so you don't make a mess. And then finally, let's take a taste. God damn it, that's exquisite. There we go. So that's my drink. I'll try to publish the next drink for the next set of movies a little sooner so that people can actually, if they don't have a full bar filled with creme de coconut or whatever else, you know, you can make it along with me. I'm not endorsing drinking, so if you just want to have a soda, that's good too.
We also don't endorse giving alcohol to children, even though we sort of implied a minute ago that we did.
No, we don't. I just have a childproof. I bought this at the spirit store because I thought it was kind of crazy that they had a Friday the 13th one, which is a. And I also got. That's what I always do. I wait till the half off happens because everything in that store is like $90, and then you're like, oh, this $1 for this Friday the 13th cup.
Look, Bill Wilton Jordan says, now I want a drink, but look at his profile picture. He has a drink. So, yeah. Bill, you kind of do have a drink already.
I think next week I'm going to make another pineapple rum-based drink. So if you guys are into that or if you have any requests and would like to see me make any other drinks, please ask. But we should probably at this point talk about what next week's movies are.
I think that's an excellent idea. And I've already sort of forgotten what it was. The first movie is going to be Kathy's Curse, which is one of Sam's faves. I know.
Probably my favorite movie ever. I'll be watching the Severin Blu-ray of it because I'm fancy. But then Becca, actually my wife, requested that movie because she loves it. And I even have a Kathy's Curse mask that I'll probably be wearing for some of the movie. And the second movie will be Bill's pick, which is?
The Children.
Yes.
And we were talking about The Children earlier in the chat, and I think it would be an excellent second feature because it'll be another evil child double feature.
We were kind of caught between Devil Times 5 and or what's the other name for that? The People?
The Horrible House on the Hill.
Yeah.
And also People Toys.
People Toys. That's my favorite because it has the heads on those pawns. I love that.
People Toys.
No, it's gonna be The Children.
People Toys was the original title of Devil Times 5, but the second feature next weekend is going to be the children. So join us.
The first will be Kathy's Curse, and my wife and I will probably be acting out several scenes from it for your pleasure before the movie begins.
Will that kind of be like a floor show
I believe so.
at the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
Oh, no shadow casting will be done.
So it's time for the Drive-In Asylum ad gallery for The Child.
Awesome.
Now, and I think this video is actually going to work, unlike the last one. So The Child was first released in March 1977. Here's an ad for from Del Rio for our first one. But actually the movie was made earlier than that, much earlier. I think it was filmed around 74 or 75. The director's name is Robert Voskanian, and the producer's name is Robert Dadashian. And they met at film school at Columbia University. They just decided they wanted to get into movies, and both guys are of Armenian descent. And I think Robert Voskanian was raised in Iran, and then he moved to the United States to go to school. They went to see Night of the Living Dead, and they were both really impressed with just how good it was and how cheap the budget looked. You know, like they could do a movie like that. So naturally, the first movie that they made had zombies in it, and was The Child. It was originally called Children of the Night, by the way. They didn't really know what to do with it, and then along came Harry Novak. And Harry Novak purchased it from them, which he was wont to do with young, inexperienced directors that had a finished film. He came along and got the movie from them and released it, and they never saw a penny. And
once you're done with this, I have prepared a list of my favorite titles of Harry Novak films that I'd like to share with everybody, because I love Harry Novak so much. So
yeah, it's got to be said.
But I love him so much.
Here's an ad from Jackson, Tennessee, where it was the grand opening of the Jackson South screen at the Jackson Drive-In. I think it was a second screen at the Drive-In, but the first feature they showed was The Child with
a great start
with co-feature Shampoo.
Oh man,
can you see that? It's like right at the bottom of the ad.
I mean, if I was like, yeah, the shampoo works well with this.
It's the first thing I would think of.
And the first time I saw this movie was at your house at a Halloween party, and it had no sound, and I was just like in awe of how strange it was. And you were being the perfect host you always are, running back and forth. And I said, "Hey, what's this movie?" And you went, "It's The Child," and you just like ran into the other room.
Because anytime anybody wants to talk about The Child, I'm more than willing. That's a really interesting way to see this movie, Sam, though, because if you watched it without sound, it would have been a totally different experience.
It is like a dream already, and it was even stranger watching it with just a combination of Goblin and John Carpenter music and Thrill Kill Cult playing over it, which is, I think, probably how everybody should see this movie.
After The Child originally debuted in early 1977, just a few months later, it came back as part of this double feature with another Harry Novak acquisition, Axe. Which was a 1974 movie originally titled Lisa Lisa.
Yep.
And Harry acquired it and released it on a double feature with The Child. Other movies played with The Child too, but probably the most common one was Axe. Well, the one that's up on the screen now is a double feature of The Child and Toys Are Not for Children.
Oh.
Now imagine an evening at the drive-in that incorporated
a soul-crushing evening at the drive-in of movies about horrible childhoods and devastated lives.
It's bonkers, absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
Here's The Child playing with Tobe Hooper's Eaten Alive.
That's a great double bill. I 100% endorse that double bill.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's probably controversial to say this, but I think The Child is the better movie of the two.
Yeah, Eaten Alive's not a great movie, but I have such a warm place in my heart for it, despite its badness.
Oh yeah, I love it. I'm not saying it's crap or anything, but
it's like why I loved the Cleveland Indians growing up, because I knew they would never be great, but I wanted to love them.
Here's another lineup that features The Child with our second feature last weekend, Beyond the Door 2.
Another great lineup. Man, I really don't like 2020. I really wish I lived back in like 78. I'm just going to say that tonight.
I think we can all agree with you there. The Child was one of those movies that had multiple titles, and here are some of them. The first one and the most notable one is Kill and Go Hide.
Yes.
And the first evidence of this playing under that title was from September 1982 in Fort Myers, Florida. I was only able to find 2 locations where it played theatrically with this title. The tagline says, "Beware of the Screaming Dead," which it's interesting because that was The Child was actually announced in Variety as being titled "The Curse of the Screaming Dead," or "The Child of the Screaming Dead."
That's a great title.
The Screaming Dead was in the title somewhere, and here they just decided to go with something else, but kept the Screaming Dead thing for the tagline. And the other place that it played as Kill and Go Hide was in New York City in January 1983. And this ad is a little more lurid because the tagline says, "Something's eating everyone in the cemetery." And Rosalie has secret friends. Be careful, they bite.
It's giving a little bit away.
I found this double feature of Kill and Go Hide playing with Extra.
Oh,
This was also in New York, and I couldn't find an actual print ad for it, but here's something just cut directly from the generic listings.
is that Night of Asshole Children?
That's another nasty kid movie. Yeah. I always think of that as an Alien movie, but it isn't.
But, Bill, Extra is any movie that you want it to be. It crosses so many genres.
It's all things to all men.
Yeah.
Here's another notable appearance of Kill and Go Hide. It was one of Elvira's Movie Macabre.
Yeah.
This was from 1985. I forgot to put the date on here, but this was sometime in, I think, November 1985. Elvira showed it, and she has some funny comments about it. You should go watch them. They're posted on YouTube. Kill and Go Hide was a title that it took with it to home video. And also, here are some other titles. La Niña. For Spanish-speaking countries. But interestingly, in parentheses, the English title is given as Zombie Child. And Zombie Child was another title that the movie had. Now, it's hard to find any evidence of it ever being exhibited theatrically with that title. However, this looks like a UK quad sheet. And it also has the UK X rating. And a new tagline, "If the Omen scared you, this one will haunt you." So maybe it screened as Zombie Child in the UK. I know it did show up on home video as Zombie Child in several territories. Now, this is an Italian poster that really promises more than the film can deliver. There's a crowd of zombies with a woman in the middle of them, and they're all leading into this house. And the title, the Italian title, loosely translates to "The House of the Zombie." And here's something else from another Italian variation that also promises something that really does not appear in the film. This isn't a movie where the zombies want to eat you. And I stand corrected. There are a few scenes in Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things where the zombies are seen eating their victims. But The Child, nothing that happens on this poster happens in the movie, but it's a fantastic poster nonetheless. The European markets often had these sensational posters that the movies just could not live up to.
As you always say, I wish we could make that poster into the movie.
That's the movie that I want to see. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone else has it, but the best way of viewing this obviously is the new Arrow release. Arrow's been releasing a lot of Harry Novak movies, including obviously Toys Are Not for Children and The Toy Box. Both of those have recently come out from Arrow. And more stuff obviously, but the American Horror Project Volume 2 has this movie in it, and from spending a lot of time of watching these on comps or VHS level dupes of this, like seeing it in high definition is really a revelation. Like it's totally worth the price of that set, which is not that high. It's totally worth it. And there's 2 other pretty decent movies on it as well. Dark August is, I think, also worth the price of the set, even though it's a movie where nothing happens, but in a very wonderful way.
I also have to agree with you. Those of us who were watching The Child before Arrow resurrected it, just to see it in high definition like that was absolutely stunning. This movie means a lot to me. I really think it's a well done, ultra low budget movie. It's not only low budget, ultra low budget.
Speaking of low budget, here's some Harry Novak titles that I thought everybody would enjoy hearing.
Okay, yeah, give us those.
His first movie that he produced as a pseudonym, Seymour Tuckus, which Seymour Butts, Kiss Me Quick. And then he produced a movie called Crazy Wild and Crazy, in case you weren't thinking. He did the Mondo Mod, which is actually going to be on my site this weekend, is a wonderful journey down Times Square. Not Times Square. Well, some of Times Square and a lot of California and the Whiskey a Go-Go.
Watching
Suburban Pagans, which is a great title.
I've switched to child.
The Notorious Cleopatra, which came out a year or two after the famous Cleopatra. Wilbur in the Baby Factory. I am Curious Tahiti, which is nothing to do with I'm Curious Yellow. The Toy Box. Prostitution, Pornography USA, which he produced as William J. Gavin. Country Cousins, which Joe Bob showed the poster from in his show, as well as the poster for Sweet Georgia. Please Don't Eat My Mother, which is a great title. I think just hearing that title, I want to see that movie. And
that movie's fantastic. It's about a man-eating plant.
Oh, really? That's a great name.
Yeah, Renee Bond is in it too.
Oh yeah, she was in a ton of his stuff. Also, Sexual Kung Fu in Hong Kong. I can't even say that without laughing. That's a great title. His greatest title is Wham Bam Thank You Spaceman, which if you haven't seen the trailer for is perfect. Also Rattlers, which is a great movie, and Rituals, which Lana brought up before, which is wonderful, and Moments of Love, which he produces his alternate name H. Hersey, because he also, obviously, he's one of these producers. He directed a few movies too. The one from doing Mondo stuff like Mondo Mod and Mondo Keyhole to The Mad Butcher, Frankenstein's Castle of Freaks, Axe, where he would bring these movies out into the U.S. And then he kind of did the journey from these movies that wouldn't even get a PG rating today, but were considered X rating in the mid 60s to finally moving into the actual dirty movies as H. Hersey later. And then before his death in 2014, he's on a lot of the original Something Weird DVDs. And he did, his commentaries are kind of famous for how funny they are, where he remembered a lot of stuff from making these films and was not shy about it. I first learned about him in the Something Weird trailer compilations because his movies always started with his signature kind of getting written gigantic, like a Harry Novak production. And it looks so fancy. And I'm like, surely this movie's going to be quality. And then you get something like The Erotic Adventures of Romeo and Juliet, which has a great line where he's like, Horatio, I do believe you are gay. And it's very, everybody has a fake English accent. It looks like a horrible movie. I'm sure Wham Bam Thank You Spaceman is a horrible movie too, but for a good 45 seconds of the trailer, it is a good movie. And really, isn't that what it's all about? It's just getting you in the theater. Obviously, he had nothing to do with the child getting made. He just took it over. He's probably the only person that made money off this movie. And by it coming out from Arrow and his estate selling it to them, even from Beyond the Grave, Harry Novak is making more money off the child than anybody that made the movie. So a success story in exploitation films, if there ever was one.
Yeah, they never saw a penny from the child, and they actually talked to Arrow Video on the bonus features in the Blu-ray, and it's sad because they bring this up, what might have come later from Robert Vizcanian if he had gone on to direct more movies, because this was his only movie that he made. The Child was the only movie he directed anyway.
Yeah, and it's sad because there's a lot of promise in this movie, especially the last 10 minutes are really fraught with tension.
Yeah.
I love them. I love the whole movie, but the last 10 minutes are great. And I had this preloaded up on YouTube, and the Arrow version of it, the cover is up where you can buy or rent it through YouTube. And it's just awesome that Arrow puts together these great packages for movies that you never expected to get this level of treatment, to get these beyond criterion level treatment to movies that before had been relegated to Mill Creek 50 movie packs.
Yeah, I'm really hoping to see folks at Red Wolf Inn on their next American Horror Project set.
Oh, it's a perfect movie for it. I was so happy that a second one came out because the first one's got a lot of great stuff on it too. It has The Witch That Came from the Seas on it.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see what's next. They're putting out a Gamera set that they announced yesterday that is all 12 Gamera films. It's $120, and honestly, the budget for that they had of putting together this Gamera set is more than any Gamera movie put together ever had. And I'm just astounded. And they're also putting out Flash Gordon, if you didn't see, and it's packed with extras. It actually has a documentary about the canceled Nicholas Rogue Flash Gordon movie, which seems to be worth the price of admission for this. And Brian Blessed did an audio commentary for the movie too.
Was it a nude audio commentary?
It's just him in the corner sitting there naked.
Can we pretend that it is?
With just his wings on, Becca said. He's nude with his wings on and he flies around.
Ugh.
It's just as a picture.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, but I'm super excited about that. Arrow, honestly, we're like, for everybody that says the physical media is dead, we're really living in a golden age of physical media where shit that I would never expect to come out is coming out with a lot of care and great packaging. So it's a good time to be alive.
Anything you want to say before we start the movie?
If anybody, when we start the next film, I hope everybody comes back. I'd like to see who's seen it before and who hasn't. And if you have any ideas, we've been child heavy on movies, but we really like scary kid movies. I think it's just such a cool genre. Yeah, they're the best. If anyone has any other ideas for films that are either on Tubi for free or YouTube that they'd like to see us watch and talk about, we're open to that too. But I'm really excited for people to watch this. And I know Becca's only seen a little bit of this, so I'm excited for her to watch it.
Yeah, I hope you guys come back after the movie to talk about it because I'm crazy about this movie and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's see. Greg Goodsell joined us as well. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Greg.
And I don't think I've seen him in the chat before.
Mm-mm.
And Mark says this is the first time he's ever seen The Child. So
awesome.
The key to this movie is, the first time I saw it, I really was kind of, oh, that's all it is? Because I expected it to be a zombie movie, like a Romero zombie movie. And it isn't, except for like maybe the last 10 minutes. It really gets the good Romero-esque zombie stuff going at the end. But don't dismiss the rest of the movie because it's just very well done. In this movie, you also see a little girl with telekinetic powers like Carrie, a scary scarecrow that comes to life,
and a jack-o'-lantern that is positively frightening.
A jack-o'-lantern that follows the heroine around the room.
That's my favorite part of the whole movie. So I'm excited for people to see that.
And this is interesting. Bill Green said, I thought it was my first time till I hit the link, and I evidently watched half of it at some point in my life. That happens to me all the time on YouTube. What's even more alarming is when you go and click on the movie and the whole movie has been watched and you don't remember it.
That happens to me a lot because, or I've watched it under another title, and then I'm like, I don't remember this. And then halfway through it, I'm like, oh yeah, I saw this.
So make sure you come back after The Child to just talk about the movie, and maybe it'll traumatize you so much that you need to get it all out. And we are the place. So we'll see you back here after we watch The Child.
Under 17 not admitted without parents or guardian.
So welcome back to the Driving Asylum double feature after our final feature of the evening, The Child from 1977. Film directed by Robert Voskanian, produced by Bob Dadashian, and one of my favorite films.
This is probably, I think, probably the 5th or 6th time I've seen it, and I still enjoy it more every time.
Yeah, there's always something new to find in it, and especially now that we have this beautiful transfer. I know the link we gave wasn't an HD presentation, and I'm really sorry about that. I hope that you'll go out and purchase the Arrow Video box set, American Horror Project Volume 2, which features the child in a stunning HD presentation.
Yeah. It's funny. Someone just said, and I agree. It's a lo-fi movie that's strong on mood, but lacks narrative momentum and logic. But so does Phantasm, and everybody loves that movie. So there's a lot of parts in the movie where I'm like, well, it doesn't make sense, but then I just kind of move past them.
That's an excellent point. That it's even in comparing it to Phantasm and the budget and what they did with the budget. This movie seems like it had even less money in the budget than Phantasm.
And the other thing I love about it is, like, it's almost impossible to even tell what year it's taking place in. Like, we were talking about that during it. Is it the 30s? Is it today? Is it, like, what is happening? But that's kind of cool that, like, it just seems to exist in its own world.
Yeah, it really does. It's like Sean says, it gets better every time that you view it, because there's always some new aspect of it that, like, when I first saw it on home video, it was like one of those awful bootleg VHS presentations, and I still liked it, but it wasn't a great viewing experience. And then after I got the HD presentation, I noticed that there are all these shots of the horizon, and you can see zombies starting to walk over the horizon in it, but you really don't notice it when the print's very dark. It's just one of the subtle things that the director does in this movie to kind of get under your skin.
I think that's neat, because there are some movies that I think that HD sometimes takes away from it. We talked about Manos the last time, where because you can see the city, it's kind of it takes away from it a bit, because I like the claustrophobic nature of that. But what I like about this, it makes this one better. And I think it's funny, Becca had not seen it, and she said at one point, she's like, "Is this Italian? Because it's so dubbed." And I'm like, "No, it's just they didn't shoot any sync sound, so this is just what they had."
Yeah, the way they shot this movie was really interesting. The reels look kind of like sketchy and jumpy, because the movie was shot on short ends. And what that means is, when you used to take the film to get developed, and when you shot a movie, you paid by the foot. A lot of labs charged by the foot. And if you didn't shoot the whole roll of film, they would just cut the unexposed part off. And then they had this short reel of unexposed film that, regardless, you could still use it. So you could purchase it from the lab very cheaply. And sometimes the lab would even give it to you for free if you brought it back there to have it processed. So, and that's how this movie was shot, on short ends. And a lot of it is just, it almost looks pasted together with Scotch tape.
I remember when I went to filmmakers, I was one of the last classes that learned how to do 16 millimeter cutting and putting in, and literally that's pretty much what you do. It's like trying to get the Scotch tape so it doesn't come across too much in the across things, and it's nice and clean. Now it's with nonlinear editing and digital editing, you would never know. But that's the amazing thing, is I get so many direct to streaming movies to review for our site, and none of them have the imagination of this movie that was shot. That literally, if you think about it, you had to kind of, if a scene went too long, you potentially could have run out of feet of film by shooting on short ends. So you have to be really tight on what you shoot, and it really limits you on reshoots as well.
That could account for a lot of the movie's ultra low budget look, and maybe the acting isn't all that great, or the blocking didn't come off quite right, and probably they just had to use whatever they shot. Maybe the actors only had one time to do it.
Yeah, We talked about like the beginning feels almost sub SF Brown Rig with the before we get into the fantastic parts of the movie. The human drama feels a little stilted in the beginning.
Yeah, it's very stylized and stiff.
Yeah.
But some people might see that as a liability, but actually it lends something to this movie because, like you like to say about this movie, it doesn't look like it's taking place in anybody's reality. It's just sort of, existing in this strange netherworld. And that's what I like about this and movies like it. Because it doesn't really matter that the actors aren't that great, as long as they can communicate something to the audience or at least give you something to bounce off of, then they're doing an okay job.
This is a video nasty, and there's not that much. I mean, there's the face torn away at the end, but it's not a lot where there's at no point where I'm like, oh man, this is like like Dead Alive or a movie like that. Maybe I'm inured to violence at this point in films, but it doesn't really feel. It feels more psychological than gore.
I think it really does have some strong gore in it. Personally, that was one of the first things that jumped out at me when I saw it. Is I wasn't expecting it to be quite so violent, like especially the old woman when she got her face like torn open and her eye was hanging there. One of the zombies is leaning into the shack at the end, and Richard Hanners like delivers this axe blow and totally smashes its head open. And I think that was really sort of a shocking moment for me. The first time I saw the movie, I was like, ooh, I wasn't expecting something that violent.
And John just mentioned the old man's the best of the actors. I love him in this movie. Him laughing at the dead Boy Scouts is one of the funnier parts. Also, we also learned that psychic girls hate grapefruit, which who knew?
He was the only professional actor in the cast. The guy who played the old man, I think he was the only one that had any real acting experience. Laurel Barnett was a stage actress. I looked her up, and she really didn't make that many movies, but she did do some stage stuff. Richard Hanners, who plays the brother, I don't really know what else he's been in. And of course, Rosalie Cole, who plays Rosalie. That's the only movie that she was ever in.
One of the things we talked about at the end of it is the heroine gets away, but she's been completely ineffective. Like she's, of anybody in the movie, she's done the least. She's not even a final girl. She doesn't deserve to survive, and like she just kind of wanders away from things.
She does not deserve her final girl status at all because, first of all, okay, Richard Hanners is being pulled under the floor, and all she can do is stand there and go, and pull her hair. But then she goes and gets an axe.
Yeah.
So why didn't she get the axe when those zombies were trying to take him? That would have been the time,
When I was a young monster kid, I used to always play those games with people where it's like, how do you defeat this monster? How do you defeat this monster? Now I know, psychic girl, axe. That's it. That's all it takes. Not fancy at all. It's just an axe.
But also, I wanted to mention that we have to talk about the music in this film because it's so distinctive.
Yeah, I love the music, and both films tonight had really distinctive music, but this one especially is wonderful.
Yeah, the music was performed by Michael Quattro, who is Susie Quattro's brother, and I'm pretty sure Michael Quattro did all the music himself, or maybe I'm thinking there was another person involved. Michael Quattro just did like the synth stuff, but I'm pretty sure it was all Michael. It sounds a lot like the melody from Love Story. Where do I begin?
My mom used to have a music box that played that.
Me too.
Yeah. Love Story was a monster in the 70s. I think that was a huge date movie.
Well, Michael Quattro definitely heard the score from Love Story because it really does sound like that, and there's a mad Liberace quality to it.
Oh man, that's an interesting theory.
Like Liberace as the Phantom.
Oh, I'd like to make that movie.
It's really accurate in this case, and whenever something happens that was scary or weird. There was like this moment where he would go on the keys. Like that's all it was just dragging your finger along the keys.
I kind of like when that happens in music, in movies. I mean, they have. I'm looking on the IMDb site. They also have a person named Rob Wallace that did the music too.
Okay, so there were two people involved.
Yeah,
in the
I'm trying to
score.
see what else, if anything else, he had done before I fall down the Harry Novak rabbit hole of looking at his IMDb page again. He actually did the Mario's early years video game music. And Mario's Time Machine and Mario is Missing. I believe he was the composer on those, and a lot of video games is pretty much all that he worked on, and a lot of sound effects for video games, which is intriguing.
Ralph Lucas wrote the movie. He also wrote Planet of Dinosaurs, which is a very
Yeah.
it's an
Another
interesting
movie
pair of films to have under your belt.
Another movie that was probably shot on short ends.
It was
Yeah.
definitely short on budget.
Now people just use their iPhones.
Yeah, this is a good point from John Fulcher. Love Story was referenced in Beyond the Door.
Yeah.
Rather, the obsession with Love Story that there was in the 70s. So that's a good point.
That feels like a movie that was in theaters for like 2 years.
Love Story?
And also, Love Story is also referenced on the poster for Dr. Phibes.
That's right.
Yeah, the love never means having to say that you're ugly.
We were talking about how Rosalie was a monster kid because she has all that shit in her room, like a skull,
King Kong.
King Kong, and then there's a rubber spider in her drawer. And plus, like, she loves zombies. For real.
Or tramps. There's a big problem in this town with tramps.
We can call them tramps, but we really mean zombies.
I like that was such a problem in 30s towns. Like these tramps just got off trains in small towns and decided to just
graveyard.
Yeah, they just like she has a lot of friends up in the graveyard that she hangs out with and brings dinner to.
Oh, they're just tramps.
Yeah, nobody watched Kids. Like we've talked about it before. Nobody watched Kids until like 1988 or 87 or 80. Post Adam Walsh, people started watching their kids. But before that, nobody watched their kids. You could just go play with tramps in the graveyard whenever you wanted to.
Also, The Child is a Halloween movie.
Yes. Yeah, especially with the jack-o'-lantern floating around the room.
Yeah, there's a scene in Halloween. And not only is it does Halloween take place in the movie, but they also have a lot of Halloween themes in the film. Like someone mentioned that howling wind that you always hear in the forest, even when there's no wind blowing. That's the same wind that's on Chilling Thrilling Sounds of the Haunted House. And that's probably just coincidence because it's from a sound library, but it's a strange coincidence indeed. And also the use of a scarecrow in the movie is very Halloweenish too.
And you know what? We talked each week are these movies, quarantine movies. Both these movies are trapped somewhat in a house for a good chunk of the movie. I remember when I watched this at your house for the first time. That's why I thought this was Italian, because suddenly they leave this house that could be anywhere, and it just looks like such an alien. And I'm like, why are we here?
Kenny and Company.
I've never seen What is Kenny and Company?
Kenny and Company is the first film. I'm making like half a connection here. Is that Don Coscarelli's first?
Oh
film?
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Michael Baldwin and Reggie Bannister are both in it. Yeah. Never seen that.
I haven't seen it either. I've only just seen clips in Phantasm documentaries. That's the only reason I know what it is.
Yeah.
And
Marcy, yeah, the Scarecrow does look incredibly sinister.
Michael Ferrari, nice to see you. Michael's from the Retro Movie Love podcast, and now he has his own podcast called The Last Video Store. I think it's just called The Last Video Store. I hope that's right.
By the way, speaking of video stores, I got a text tonight from one of my friends that was in Hubbard, Ohio, and there is still a family video there. And he said, "Isn't it weird that they sell CBD oil?" And I said, "Every family video sells CBD oil now. That's how they're staying in business." And as well as their site, because you can buy really, if you want cheap DVDs, they actually have a half off Arrow and half off Kino sale on their site right now, which is pretty cool.
So, anything else about the child you want to talk about?
I really like the fact that she came to be the babysitter or the nanny or whatever she is, and within a day she's already just running off with the brother. Like she didn't even get a chance. Did she even put her shit in her room? The first thing I do when I get on vacation is I unload all my stuff and organize it and put it in drawers. And if you're moving in to live with a family, you're bringing more than a suitcase. You're probably going to stay there for a couple days. And she's like, you know what? I got to get with this guy.
She didn't waste any time.
A lot happens in a couple days. This is a very time compressed movie, and she's just not a very good nanny. Also, the other thing I've learned about psychic girls, as we'll learn more next week with Kathy's curse, is they really need a strong mother figure, because without a strong mother figure, they go crazy. If you think about it, like Carrie made it to like 16 or 17 before she went off the rails, and it took pig's blood and a guy treating her bad, and it took a lot to get Carrie to blow up. This girl the child hasn't even entered puberty, and she's already got an army of tramps that live in the graveyard ready to do whatever she wants. And the other thing about the end of it is, like, it's very shocking that it's like, I'm totally waiting for the heroine to die, and she just grabs like you said, she grabs an axe and boom, done. Okay, let's leave. Like, where does she go from here? Like, does she get any references from this family as she goes to the next house to be a nanny?
What's your previous experience? Well, I destroyed the last family I worked for, but we won't talk about that.
They seem to be doing okay, but then all hell broke loose when I ran away with her brother, and then his face got bitten in half, and then I had to kill the girl with an axe. But I'm here to watch your family.
They had a morbid sense of humor, though. They laughed about the Boy Scouts dying when they stirred their stew with oleander.
What a weird... That had to really happen. Do you know what I mean? That's like one of those weird, like, this happened in my town growing up, so I'll just throw it in the movie.
It has the ring of authenticity about it. And the other thing that I forgot to mention was, okay, so she has these zombies that she's brought back from the dead or whatever, but she's going into the cemetery to visit her mother, who is also dead. So why did she never resurrect her mother?
Maybe she can only bring back guys.
I tend to think, though, that maybe the zombies, there's some connection I'm not making there about the zombies, because they seem to be zombies that existed already, and she just controls them with her telepathy.
That's an interesting thought. There's a lot of backstory of her power. Her power set is never. It's almost like it's. And this is a spoiler for next week. That's why I love Kathy's curse so much, because her powers are never fully defined, and throughout the movie, she does things like sometimes she can teleport, and sometimes she can't, and sometimes she wants the power, and sometimes she doesn't. It's an even more erratic movie than this movie. Like, there's no really any rules for that entire movie, and which keeps it from being anything but boring. That's one of the major things I've thought about in these movies, that, like, that's what I'm happy about, is I don't feel like we've shown a boring movie yet. We've shown some challenging films, I will say, but they've been anything but boring.
Rosalie seems to be she's very comfortable with her powers. In fact, she seems to be getting better at it when the movie begins, because there's that whole conversation she has with Mrs. Whitfield, and Mrs. Whitfield tells her, you know, there were people that were coming here and being boarders for me, and then they had to leave because Rosalie just kept doing things. Like she's like, I couldn't put my finger on it and prove that it was her, but she seemed to always be around when something weird would happen. So Rosalie had been using it to scare off Mrs. Whitfield's boarders, and she just likes scaring people, which is also something that a monster kid loves to do.
Yeah, she's kind of taking it to the next level.
She goes too far. She's beyond the limit.
You know what other movie this kind of reminded me of a bit? This is another psychic kid movie. You ever seen The Spell from 1977, the TV movie?
Oh, yeah, I have.
With Lee Grant.
You told me to watch that.
Yeah, I love it because it's like you should sympathize with the girl in the movie because she's treated like Carrie, but suddenly she's like taking it way too far. And I think that there's something really interesting in that. And then finally her mom has to like spank her pretty much and get her to behave. I'm a big fan of kids behaving. We've talked about this. It seems like every movie we've shown are aware of kids behaving badly in movies and either getting their comeuppance or not getting their comeuppance in the movie.
That's one of
So-
the biggest problems I have with the kids in The Devil's Times 5, because they're so bad, and all they
Oh.
need is a spanking, and nobody will do it.
Yeah, Sean Minnis asked, "How about the girl in The Visitor? She's the worst." Space Jesus has to come down from the moon to get her and take her back so that her stepfather doesn't win the basketball championship.
Yeah, she's on a whole other level, I think.
I think we should. That's going to be a thing on my site. Will be the top 10 most badly behaved children.
I love when she grabs that lady who's in the wheelchair and like shoves her through them. Suddenly there's a big piece of glass there. Or a mirror.
Yeah. To this day, and I know we've said it before, and I'll say it again, I have no idea what the fuck Shelley Winters is doing in that movie.
Well, you just have to go with it, you know?
Yeah, and also, yeah, Frederick mentioned, yeah, a young Helen Hunt is in the spell. That's why I love old TV movies, because there's this always this opportunity that you're about to find like someone just shows up in a movie, and you're like, I had no idea that they were in that.
What about Kiss of the Tarantula? That's a good one.
Oh, that is a good one. Yeah,
For evil children.
that is a good one.
Even though tarantulas are not deadly, and I don't understand what which they really just cause a heart attack in the movie. So
yeah,
they're not biting people and killing them. So who's got some more bad children movies for us? Let us know in the comments.
Ruby is another good example or bad example.
Yeah, Ruby has an identity crisis. I like it, and I like Curtis Harrington's stuff.
I love Curtis Harrington. Yeah,
It's missing a few connecting pieces, I think.
I think The Bad Seed's my all-time favorite bad kid movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really get better than that. Like Rhoda Penmark is like the super villainous. And Michael Farr mentioned Mikey. Mikey's another great one too. Or The Good Son, which is pretty much the same movie. There's Beware Children at Play, which is not a good example. Village of the Damned, you could say Damien movies. I guess The Devil Within Her, I guess you could think of the baby as being evil in that. And I think Kill Baby Kill could kind of sort of be an example too.
Demon Witch Child that's the one I was talking about. It's also known as The Possessed, directed by Osorio. Mark Dockham mentioned it. And Salem's Lot did have some bad vampire kids.
That is still, when that kid flies in the window, still one of the most frightening.
Oh, yeah. Salem's Lot, I think if anybody asked me what I thought one of the scariest movies ever made, it would have to be Salem's Lot.
Yeah. And
so
Sean mentioned Julie Darling, which has Sybil Danning in it, so of course I've seen it. The Paperboy, which is a Canadian version of that, which is about a paperboy that likes to kill old women by putting plastic bags over their head and choking them out, which it starts with that. And then he tries to kill William Catt by setting his boat on fire. So that's another great one of those. And Firestarter, obviously, but she's kind of I consider her the heroine of that movie versus the bad kid of that. And there's also, in Twilight Zone, the movie, there's the remake of the one Twilight Zone where the kid has the powers over the whole family and can manipulate reality is another good one too.
If Family Ties Melrose Place crossover is what the world needed. I wholeheartedly agree, Michael.
I loved Melrose when it got crazy enough that characters like the one redhead doctor had, when she took her wig off, she had the big scar on the side of her head. That's when that show got awesome, when it was just like, fuck reality. I'm so glad Michael Ferrari has seen that someone other than me has seen the Paperboy. John mentioned Trick or Treat with David Carradine had a rotten kid. I've seen that. It's Alive is a great example too. I would definitely recommend It's Alive. And someone just mentioned The Children, which is going to be on our movie for next week.
That's right. We're going to watch Kathy's Curse and The Children next Saturday night, starting at 8 p.m. on the Drive-In Asylum double feature.
Bill and I were talking about the pit earlier. You actually looked to see if it was on YouTube because that was in consideration for next week.
Somebody just sent me the novelization of The Pit.
Oh wow!
It's called Matthew. Or no, it's called Teddy. Matthew is the title for Scream Bloody Murder. But the novelization of The Pit is called Teddy. I love I Dismember Mama too. And even though the title doesn't really match, it really should have never been called I Dismember Mama. It's another one of those like really good early 70s psychological horror films.
Movies where nothing happens.
Exactly. Which is why I love it.
I think we watched that here one time for some reason, I think. And John mentioned Godsend. He never saw the movie, but it was the Siskel and Ebert Dog of the Week. That's just telling me to watch it. We talked last week, like anytime Siskel and Ebert picked the Dog of the Week when I was a kid, that and morally offensive Catholic movies are my jam. So if you get on the Siskel and Ebert list and the Catholic list, and if Rex Reed hated your movie, then I would love it. The Other is a great one too.
I love The Other.
The Other is completely forgotten because when the book came out, it was as big a deal, if not bigger, than The Omen and The Exorcist. It was a really big book, and the movie just kind of isn't thought of at all anymore, which is pretty amazing. And I love that movie.
How about this one, The Orphan, Friday the 13th?
I've never seen that.
I've never seen that either. I've seen ads for it, and I know that they had that title before Sean Cunningham had it.
My Brother Has Bad Dreams. That's a great one.
I love My Brother Has Bad Dreams. In fact, I don't know if you heard, we watched the other movie called Scream Bloody Murder about the kid with a hook for a hand. We watched that a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about My Brother Has Bad Dreams, which of course also was titled Scream Bloody Murder and opened within a week or a month of the other Scream Bloody Murder.
That's another one you've texted me in the middle of the night about to tell me how much you love it. My all-time favorite movie text I got from you was, I just watched Olga's Girls. And holy fucking shit, Olga's my favorite person ever. It was like this long text about how much you love Olga.
She's mean. The Death Ship. I love Death Ship.
I love that movie.
That's a movie that I hated when I was a kid, and I love it now. It makes no sense.
No. It's, yeah, who is, like, almost everybody's an asshole in it, too, which is really one of my favorite things in movies, when you're like, when you don't care for literally a single person in the cast.
That movie chickens out and does not kill the children in it, and the children are very annoying. They're totally children that you want to see die in a movie, and they don't.
There's this, well, that's the thing, is like post, when did that come out? Early 80s. Like, and if it had been made in the 70s, probably the kids would have died. But once we reach a certain point, it doesn't happen as much. Trilogy of Terror and Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, I would honestly watch both of those again at any time.
Yeah, these are all great suggestions. Keep it coming.
Yeah, I'll watch any TV movie, no matter how bad it is. I watched a horrible one this week, The People on the Other Side of the Lake, with Gerald McRaney, TV's Major Dad, and one of the Simon and Simons, and Delta Burke's husband. He was married to Rhoda, and they left the big city to move to this backwoods area where he could build windsurfers. And all of a sudden there were all these bodies started showing up in their house. So if you want to see a movie where Gerald McRaney wears a wetsuit, and Rhoda is way too old for him, like she's probably 20 years too old for him, so it's really disconcerting. I would recommend that movie, but not at all. Nightmares in a Damaged Brain. Oh boy.
Another one that was at the Triple Shock show in March, a couple of years ago.
people were at first laughing about it, then it gets pretty upsetting by the end of the movie.
It's a really downbeat, depressing movie, and that is a movie where kids die in it.
Yeah, it is. And you want one kid to die really bad, and he doesn't.
Windows, I love Windows, and Windows is one of those little victories that I had, because obviously until very recently nobody talked about Windows, and they always disparaged it, and I always thought it was just such an interesting movie, and I wanted to see a really nice HD presentation of it, and Scream Factory announced it, and then there it was one day, so I was thrilled. Welcome back, Stan.
Thanks. I don't know what happened. It just all of a sudden timed me out.
We had a little clue in because your camera froze and started making that robot
John
noise.
brought up a Spielberg movie that he made before Duel. I think that's House of Evil, but I'm going to look it up because I did it on my site last year.
Something Evil, that's the name of it.
Yeah, Something Evil, yeah.
Thank you, Michael. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, I was struggling through the IMDb page to get to it. But yeah, that's a pretty good one too.
I like that one, yeah.
I think there's such a fine line between TV movies and exploitation movies because they have a really similar budget. So that's what I really dig, that they're so close to each other.
Sam has an amazing site about movies called BNS About Movies. And if you haven't been there, you need to go check it out because he's got almost daily content up. And Sam writes about more movies than anybody I know.
It's okay. It's not amazing, but thank you. I really like, I just love movies, and then I get obsessed with them, and then I get like way too into stuff. Right now it's all Mexican weirdo ripoff movies like Vacation to Terror and Don't Panic, which is that's on you. It's not on YouTube, or I would love to watch it on this. That's my dream movie to come out on Blu-ray right now. That and Endgame. Do you have any movies, Bill, that you're still looking to come out and get released other than, I know Terror House obviously is the big one.
Obviously Terror House, but there are several others. One of them is Crazed. It's AKA Bloodshed, I think is the title that it had on VHS. There was another title though too, other than Crazed. It's sort of a Psycho riff from 1976, and it's just got this incredibly bleak, haunting characterization of the Norman Bates character from Psycho. It's all reimagined, of course, but I'd really love to see that on Blu-ray. And also My Brother Has Bad Dreams would be the other one.
Thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate everybody that came in and hung out with us tonight. And Bill, I appreciate Bill does a ton of hard work for this. He's been putting together some amazing videos for this, and he really gets into this, and we do too. Like, we talk throughout the week about this and get excited about it, but this is really speaking for both of us, this is really fun, and I'm so glad when the fact that other people come on and talk about Laura Gemser really makes everything I do worthwhile, because I'll tell my wife these things and she does not give a shit about Black Emmanuel at all. So I appreciate that you're here to listen.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's always cool to see everyone come in and leave comments, and thank you so much, everybody. Sean, John Strikers, Mark Dockham, Frederick Birdsall, John Fulcher, Lana Revick was here earlier, Michael Ferrari, all you guys, thank you so much for coming out and for watching the movies. And I hope you'll come back next weekend and watch Kathy's Curse and The Children with us.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll catch you next week on the Drive-In Asylum double feature. Bye-bye.
Under 17 not admitted without parents or guardian. 17 not admitted without parents or guardian.